A survey of men dealing with fertility issues suggests their needs are often ignored. Network UK says infertility can affect a man's mental health, career and finances, but warns emotional support remains scarce. This report from Graham Satchell.
Remember, it was year 2000 and my wife Merrin walked into the kitchen and she said, "Honey, I think it's time." We started trying. We assumed that it was just going to happen fairly normally, and then after 9 months or so we decided it was time to go and get some tests done. Those tests revealed that there was a problem on my side significantly, so we then went and tried a whole heap of rounds of IVF. Let's just go and do as many rounds of IVF as it takes to get the success that we longed for. What about you, Aaron? How long was it for the two of you?
For when we were trying, it's about 8 years of essentially not really having any explained reason why we weren't getting pregnant. And we had 3 miscarriages during that time, which, yeah, sort of that unspeakable pain.
For me, there was a deep sense of guilt. When you're holding your sobbing wife, it starts off month after month. And then when you're going through something like IVF, it can be week after week. And then later on, towards the end of your 10 years on this journey, sometimes it's night after night. And you go, I'm the reason for this. I'm the cause of you not getting what you so desperately want. So that led to a great sense of guilt for me.
When we were married, we were like, okay, we're gonna have 5 kids. Now I remember that.
Wow.
I remember being in
the
this
conversation where you decided how many you'd have.
And I thought, yeah, I want 5 kids. Like, that would be amazing. And it was, you know, to think back, then 10, 12 years on, it's like, okay, no, it's, you know, what my big expectations of life and these plans have all shifted.
Yeah, very much.
So, do you have that experience of seeing fathers and kids playing? Does that affect you?
That does occasionally happen, walking through a park. You do see a guy with his daughter. I would have loved a daughter. And the other thing, Aaron, I actually would have been a pretty good dad.
Looking back on it now, yeah, I think we are stronger because of it. Some days, some weeks, some months, we were pulled apart. For sure we were. And then other weeks, other months, it totally brought us together, and we were really kind of as a team going through it.
If you handle it well, it can also lead to much more intimate friendships when you do actually take that bold step of sharing yourself with somebody else. So if you handle it well, it can actually be a very good thing.
We can talk more about this. We can speak to Dr. Esme Hanna, who's the lead researcher of the study. She joins me now from Leeds. And in the studio is Sheridan Voicey. You just saw him in that report. He and his wife spent over 10 years trying to conceive, but were unsuccessful. Dr. Hanna, if I could start with you. Well, I mean, were you surprised by these findings?
No, we've done previous research about men and infertility, and we found that men do find it a deeply distressing experience. But this study is on a bigger scale, and we've really learned much more about how men experience infertility, and particularly the impacts on their mental well-being, the sort of depression, anxiety, high levels of stress that men experience, but also the impacts that there are on their relationships and also their work and finances, which we haven't discovered before in previous work.
Is this men just being men, or is it that the support really isn't there?
Reproduction obviously being focused primarily around women because of pregnancy being a site of women's labour. It very much means that men have often been excluded from conversations around reproduction, but we need to include men within those conversations because they are deeply affected by these experiences of infertility, as you heard in the clip earlier. And it's really important that we actually listen to men and find out what support they actually do need during these experiences.
Sheridan, when you first were aware that you were going to need IVF if your wife was going to conceive, how did you find the process? A lot of people find it quite demeaning for the man because the concentration is on the woman.
Oh, very much so. You know, you have the conversation with the doctor where he breaks the news that if you're the prime cause of the infertility, that you've got low sperm count or something like that. Straight away, you've got a bit of a blow to your masculinity. But then from that point on, often the conversation is very much geared around the woman. And if you're going through something like IVF, you can understand that. It's an incredibly physical process. It's an incredibly invasive process. But there is another side to the equation, absolutely. And I can't remember too many conversations that were actually brought back to me. How are you doing, Sharon? How are you feeling with this?
What about the relationship with your wife? Because she's going through a very difficult time. Mm-hmm. You're there to support her, and yet in the back of your mind, I'm the problem.
Oh gosh, I mean, as you saw in that package that we did, the sense of guilt for me was very strong in the fact that I did feel that I was the reason my wife couldn't have the most desperate thing that she wanted. The pressure into a relationship is very, very common. It's something that we hear quite a lot from readers of the book we released. A very unexpected result of our 10-year journey through infertility, which was IVF and adoption and a whole heap of other things, was a book called Resurrection Year, which has opened up the story to many other people. So I've literally heard hundreds of people's stories now who have gotten in contact with me after that. And I'm so glad that now we've got official research to back it up, because it's exactly what I've heard. The pressure comes into a relationship primarily based on decision making. Yes, there's pressure from the drugs, there's pressure from other things, but are you going to be on the same page when it comes to how many rounds of IVF you'll do, how long you'll wait for adoption, will you go through adoption, local adoption, overseas adoption? And there were times where we've got a good marriage, but it really pushed us to the edge, it really did.
Esme, I just want to look at that, because you've highlighted the difficulties for men's careers, the financial worries, but what about what it does to relationships? Because it's tough for any couple, however well they get on, to go through this. Absolutely, and those impacts on relationships is one of the things that our survey has shown, that the impacts on relationships between intimate partners can be affected by the experience of infertility, but also those relationships with friends and family, who men often describe as a poor source of support. And this is really where men may need support from others who've gone through that experience, who can understand what it's like, so that they have someone else to talk to outside of their relationship where the pressure around that infertility experience might exist. 39% of men had not sought any support for fertility issues. What did your survey find was the reason for that? Often men found that they couldn't find any support. The type of support that they were looking for didn't exist, and there has in recent times been a rise of online forums and Facebook groups that have been set up by men who've been through those experiences to support other men. Because of this lack of provision, often the support that exists is seen to be focused and targeted to women, and so men feel excluded from that. But we know that men really may value the support of other men who've been through that experience, and so some of these online settings are proving to be quite useful. But we really need to know even more about what support men might want, whether that's counselling, whether that's through their medical professionals that are dealing with their fertility issues, so that we can try and work out better support to help men and their partners when they're going through this process. Yes, I want to pick up that word process, because if you go through it, it does feel like a process for both the man and for the woman. And I'm just wondering, at the end of it, if there is no child, if it has not been successful, how easy is that to get over? Oh my goodness. It's a process. It really is. And our experience, and the experience of those that we've kind of had the privilege of journeying with, has been that you really do have to grieve well. And if you grieve well... You used the word grief. I did, yeah. To actually really grieve. It is a loss. This is the thing with infertility. It's a death without having a funeral. It happens every single month, and you never quite know how to grieve. Because you've had the highs of the hope, presumably, as well. Expectation followed by disappointment. Starts off every month, and in the end, if you're doing IVF, you're waiting for the next blood test, and that expectation and disappointment can really unravel you. And so if you do come to a point, like we did, where we had to kind of draw the line ourselves, you find that then you're able to grieve, and then you can move on with your life. And I think that's a good note to mention there, Simon, in the fact, if you handle this well, if you handle it poorly, it can be the unraveling of you. If you handle this well, you can lead to a deeper sense of self, a deeper sense of relationship and community with other people, a deeper sense of service to others. That's been our experience, but my goodness, I wouldn't wish our 10 years on anybody. Well, I really appreciate coming to talk about it. It's not easy. and it takes bravery. So Sheridan Voicey, thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon.
And Dr. Esme Hannah, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you.